Desculpa a interrupção do meio tempo, mas só passei rapidinho pra te lembrar que Conmebol Copa América 2024 e a UEFA Euro 2024 já estão disponíveis no EA Sports FC Mobile. Não perca tempo, vem participar desses eventos e vivenciar o melhor do futebol. Viva a emoção do verdadeiro futebol e escreva um novo capítulo nas histórias dos seus jogadores favoritos e todos os times participantes. EA Sports FC Mobile, o jogo de todo mundo no seu bolso. Participe e jogue agora. Inclui compras opcionais dentro do jogo, inclui itens aleatórios.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Pod Maverick After Dark, one of our off-season editions. I am Kirk Henderson, and joined as always by Josh Bowe. We are editors over at MavsMoneyball.com. Thank you for hanging out with us as we go live here on Tuesday, July 9th. It's a little before 8:30. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing? You had a long week.
Yeah, weird week. Had to drive across country, drive across Oklahoma to St. Louis. Just 2 10-hour drives with a 8-month-old infant. Was not the best, but it was for like a family funeral and stuff. Hold on one second. Parker Robert, what is it you possibly need? I told you I'm working.
I need to get some energy out.
What does that mean? This is great live podcasting. I'm just going to leave it in the show. What do you need, dude? All right. I'll see you in the morning. Good night. No. Dude. Now you're going to be in trouble after this. I'm sorry. This was a choice. Great live podcasting. My wife is out tonight with a friend. So sorry about all this, guys. At least he didn't come behind the camera. He knows better than that. So it's just, been a lot of real life getting back to it after the off season. Or after, the end of the season and kind of the flurry of off season. It is so funny how I'm just, my brain, even if the Mavericks performed well, like they made it to the Western Conference Finals in 2022. And I still feel like we had a significant amount of time before we needed to like really start to fill the dead zone of the calendar, so to speak. But we were just in the finals and then the draft and then free agency. Like, that's crazy. I am just, still kind of wrapping my mind around it. And then, we can kind of immediately progress into the news, or not the news, but the, official announcement today, where the Mavericks had a press conference for the new Mavericks, Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, and Quentin Grimes. And the Grimes one is just the one that I can't seem to remember. Like, I was like, who's that guy when the thing started today? And it's like, oh yeah, it's Grimes. Because that was the first deal.
Yeah,
and
it was.
It all comes on the back of, I think before we go, I got to find that Mavs PR tweet that had that incredible 6-team graphic thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because that, like, they
wrapped it all in together.
Yeah, that's what it was. So this trade where the Mavericks ended up with the signing trade when they ended up with Klay Thompson, almost every single deal that was done involving like moving pieces around, there was a 6-teamer, first 6-teamer in NBA history. And it mainly is like, it's for accounting purposes. It's not the sort of thing where 6 teams were talking to one another and 6 teams came up with this before they announced it. These teams all independently announced specific 1-to-1, or in some cases 3-team transactions with like the Hornets and the Warriors and the Mavericks, only for teams to figure out other ways to get involved, which is what made the graphic that Mavs PR put out, which is a really good graphic, by the way, which it shows, the trade alert. The Mavericks received Klay Thompson and a 2025 second-round pick, which is quite fascinating to me. The Wolves receive a 2031 second-round pick swap, a 2025 second-round pick, and cash. The Golden State Warriors received Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield. So Kyle Anderson from the Wolves, who they signed and then sent away to the Warriors, and Buddy Hield from the 76ers, who really crashed and burned there in the playoffs. And now he's a Warrior. And then we have the Denver Nuggets, owned by one of the richest men in the multiverse, they received cash in this trade, which I don't understand, but of course. The Hornets received Josh Green, Reggie Jackson, a 2029 second-round pick, and a 2030 second-round pick. And then the 76ers receive a 2031 second-round pick. So it's like it's not that like interesting of a of a trade, but it's like it just shows you that what happens with teams trying to stay under the different aprons and trying to keep all their assets in order. It essentially became like the spreadsheet wars where these teams figured out how to help one another without it's just an odd thing. I was very confused when I saw it, but this is why I like transaction season is not really for me, because I don't want to have to know all this shit. Do you know what I mean? Are you muted?
I was muted. My mute button doesn't like to come off there. Sorry. Yeah, I don't like having to figure out all that NBA, CBA stuff. It's a nightmare. That's why I'm glad we have Scott on our Mavs.
Shout out to Scott, CBA Mavs.
Just go to our site and read whatever he's written, because that usually helps figure it out. But yeah, so it was cool to see all the new Mavs. They always do the new player acquisition press conference. They get everyone on the stage together all at once. They don't spread it out or anything like that. So they've been doing that for years. I tweeted earlier today about the freaking OJ Mayo, Chris Kaman, Elton Brand, Darren Collison, Chris Kaman press conference. It was the first thing I think I covered for Mavs Moneyball in person, which was a nice little trip down memory lane. But yeah, these are always good. It's always tough to take anything. How much are we going to take away from these press conferences, like these public words? But I think I don't know if you how much you watched of it or how much you've read of it so far, but to me the main thing is like all the reporting from the Golden State side was real in terms of Klay's unhappiness. I think he kind of mentioned just not being okay with that situation last season. So like that came through loud and clear. Just he was not happy last season. And I think what also came through loud and clear is that he still thinks, and rightly he should, whether it happens or not, we'll see. He still thinks he's Klay. And he's shot the ball extremely well the last 3 seasons. His defense has fallen off, of course. But he made I remember something he said where he was like, I'm still the player I think I am, or something like that. So, and that was a big sore spot with him and the Warriors, was Kerr and the coaching staff and the org was like, we don't think you're that player anymore. We're going to bring you off the bench. We're going to change your minutes around in the rotation. And that kind of led to some of the consternation that led to him leaving. So it'll be interesting to see how that works in Dallas and see what he looks like when they tip off in a few months.
Yeah, so there was the press conference today. It was boring. I don't it's one of those things where it's like I don't want to like be too dismissive of it, but it's like it's one of these things that you have to do. Reporters have to go and ask questions, and then there's just not a ton there. Do you know what I mean? So the one thing that I think some people found interesting was him talking about how he liked Dallas's play style. Like that was a reason for why he was interested in playing for the Mavericks. He wanted a fresh start, but that was kind of it. It was nice to see all 3 of them. I like seeing the jersey numbers. I like seeing, the number 31 rankled the internet in a way that amused me. And that, that's Jason Terry's number. We get into the question of why hasn't Mark Cuban, or didn't Mark Cuban when he owned the team, ever retire Jason Terry's number, which is a fair question because he retired Kobe Bryant's number, who never played for the Mavericks, just happened to pass away in a tragic plane crash. But But the number 31 was a fun little mini discussion on the internet for like a day and a half, only for like, and my main like thought of it was Jason Kidd and Jason Terry are like close friends. Like they were on the Bucks coaching staff together. There's no way that they didn't ask Terry. Like the Mavericks,
I know. It's one of those things where fans care more than the players and all that.
And they should retire this man's jersey. Let's be clear.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, what else did you think was interesting from today's press conference?
I thought there were some pretty good reactions to Najee Marshall holding his jersey really tight. That was pretty funny. Maybe a good indicator on the kind of guy he's gonna, what he's going to bring on the floor. Just grasping at straws. But that was just kind of funny. Yep. Quentin Grimes kind of roasted him a little bit afterward. I thought Klay brought up it's hard to tell how much of this is like, yeah, because you just went to the finals. Like, if you didn't go to the finals, does this even come up? Mm-hmm. And talking about like the organization and how they treat players and the environment that Klay said that Dallas has fostered, that was attractive to him, that Kyrie pitched to him. And, it's one of those things where it's like, does all that stuff matter if they lost in the first round of the Clippers this season? Like, does he come to, like at the end of the day, it's like chicken or the egg. Like,
it's a great question.
Does the culture come first, or does the winning come and then the culture comes because you were winning, or do you win because of the culture you set? I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. I'm not there. So I don't know. But it is interesting, when the Kyrie trade happened, we obviously had there were a lot of doubts about the off-court stuff and how it would work. And how he has left his previous organizations. But I remember one thing, I think both of us said it at the time of the trade, was like, despite all of that, like Kyrie is still relatively well liked amongst his peers. Like,
probably one of the most. I would argue that if there's like a Q rating poll, he's one of the top 5 players. Like, everybody likes the guy.
And that never wavered, even with the mess that happened in Brooklyn and his suspensions, like that never changed. So I think that this is just, you're starting to maybe see some of this pay off a little bit. That Kyrie is, he's well liked. People probably want to play with him. And Klay mentioning that, I think, and Najee and Quentin Grimes mentioned it as well, that like they had only been in the building for, and again, guys say, this might be cliche, but they just mentioned how they felt welcomed by the organization. So I also thought, Klay talked about, not being happy. And I thought it was interesting. No one asked about his role in Dallas in terms of like, hey, would you come off the bench if the Mavericks asked you? I don't know if that was the place to ask that question.
I'm kind of glad that didn't come up. One of the things that vexed me so much about the Christian Wood and JaVale McGee thing from 2023 was just, or 2022 and 2022. It wasn't the time to have that talk. And it just ate at it's sort of like, it really did a poor job of setting the team up. Like, there was just like internal seeds. There was that was the thing that everybody got asked constantly until Kidd finally pulled McGee out. And they don't know. I mean, I feel pretty confident in saying that Klay Thompson's going to start the year small forward. Does he finish games? Who knows? Kidd loves to try stuff. If anything, Kidd's like love of trying stuff is part of why they haven't won more games, because they get off on these just doldrum of sets in November and December and January where they play sub 500 ball as they try to figure out who they are. And that may happen again this year with some of the guys that the Mavericks have. And I'm sure we will see variations of things. I mean, Klay talked a lot. I think the Kyrie thing that you said a minute ago, I think is pretty important and pretty underrated, to where the culture shift and how teams are talking about Dallas and other players are talking about Dallas. I think we need to assign almost all of that to Klay. I'm sorry, to Kyrie. Kyrie being a bit of an evangelist for the Mavericks is pretty important. Dirk Nowitzki never did that. Jason Terry kind of did, but Jason wasn't that kind of player. It's a guy getting out there and talking about how much he likes playing for his team and how much they're together as a family and that sort of thing, and playing for each other, which is something Klay said, that just goes places, even if it is cliche.
Yeah. And it goes back to, the international thing, like with Dirk and even with Luka, like Klay mentioned, like, I was on the Olympic team with Kyrie. Like, that Matt, like, these guys, they were in the same draft class. I don't know if they play, Clay's a little bit old. Like, I think he's a couple years older than Kyrie, so I don't think they were maybe in this. I don't know if they were in the same, like, AAU circuit at the same time, but, like, it matters that these guys, it's just different with players that are from the same country because they're around each other more often than like a Dirk or Luka, who, when they're doing their national team stuff, they don't see these guys, and they don't grow up in the youth system together. So, like, that just like the Mavericks haven't had. Kyrie is the first American-born All-Star the Mavericks have had since
American-born All-Star. That's
Jason
great. Josh Howard.
Yeah, Josh Howard, Jason Kidd was an injury replacement, I think, in 2010. Okay. So I don't know, but like, I don't think they've had one voted, because Kyrie was voted in when he was traded, and then of course,
did the Mavericks ever have a voted in All-Star? I guess that's starting. Like, that's
Luka, but
okay.
But before that, no. But Kyrie is the only American-born All-Star the Mavericks have had in the last. Maybe was Finley an All-Star when he was here? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Like, maybe like 1 year I'm remembering.
Yeah,
that was like during my formative basketball years. That's really tough.
But that stuff, it just matters. And it's not to say like anything about it. It's just like Luka just doesn't have the same relationships. It's just a matter of distance, and there's nothing against Luka for that. It's not his fault, or like it's not Dirk's fault that he didn't, that he wasn't a master, negotiator and luring free agents to Dallas. It's just different personalities and different backgrounds. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. And then also, you wrote about it. I don't know if we need to go on a spiel about it, about the Cuban thing, but the front office and the team he's
no longer the face.
Yeah, they have completely different leadership of the team. And I think that goes hand in hand with how people are feeling about the
I do too. I really, really do. I mean, one day we'll talk about it more, but I don't really feel like kicking anything.
No, not
because, I do think it's pretty, in the hindsight of looking back and saying, they pivoted from Donnie Nelson, a possible like basketball hall, like Naismith basketball Hall of Fame guy one day. Like, Donnie Nelson is an extremely influential basketball figure across the basketball world. Maybe not necessarily as much NBA as you think, but a lot of stuff across the world. And then Rick Carlisle, a Hall of Fame coach himself one day, I'm sure. Pivoting from that and having kind of the stones to hire Kidd, Kidd was out. Kidd was with the Lakers, but I don't think Kidd. I have a hard time seeing Kidd getting another head coaching job. Like, the situation would have had to have been just right. He had a year away from basketball, was a year with the Lakers as an assistant, and then became the Mavericks head coach. Like, it's pretty crazy. And then Nico Harrison, who was not a basketball executive. Like, those two hires, and Cuban made both of them, and then sold the team. Like, he set the course for where the Mavericks are now. And that allows us to kind of, talk, like we talked about Klay, his sort of, I felt like he woke up a lot as things went on. Like, he was on some social media clips and then went and shot some baskets. And like, there's just, granted, NBA players are so skilled, it's hard to really take, like, watching them just shoot. But watching Klay Thompson shoot in the Mavericks court was really fucking cool. I'm not really expressing that correctly, other than it's like, that dude is so good at the thing he is good at.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned before we went live about wanting to briefly mention your friend. Sorry, who was it again? I'm so sorry. Jared Dubin?
Yeah, Jared Dubin of Last Night in Basketball.
Jared Dubin. Yeah, he wrote about, kind of posted, it was a video about Klay in Dallas. Bobby Corral on Mavs.com also posted something on the Mavericks YouTube channel. Both of them hinting around the same thing about how, like, the conversation about Klay's fit offensively is pretty silly. So yeah, just seeing Klay shooting warm-up shots in Mavericks colors on the Mavericks practice court is pretty cool. And seeing those videos go up, relatively the same time today, just saying like, hey, this guy is going to be a monster for your off-ball spacing and your shooting and your offense, and how the Mavericks can incorporate him, and how they used Tim Hardaway Jr. and they'll just use some of those sets for Klay, and they'll bring some of the sets that Klay ran in Golden State, because the Mavericks will do that. I mean, people like to act like they don't run sets. I understand it does get frustrating sometimes with the isolation ball, but They did run off-ball stuff for Tim Hardaway Jr. Problem, they just didn't have Tim Hardaway was the only guy on the roster that could do all that stuff, so they just never had.
You're not running off-ball actions for Derek Jones Jr. other than at the rim. Whereas what Jared talks about, and everybody that's listening to this knows this stuff. So repeating things you already know, but watching Jared do it over a 5-minute film was actually pretty fun because he kept rewinding and going back and forth. It's on his Twitter timeline. It's Last Night in Basketball. Also, that's the website where you see what Klay's presence on the court does to defenders, where due to just what they're told to do by coaching, they're staying like a foot, 2 feet closer, which that sort of geometry opens up the floor for people who can drive. And you know who likes to drive the basketball, or rather who is very good at driving the basketball? Luka Doncic. So it's pretty amazing to watch, the different things that they do for him with Golden State and envision elements where they will hopefully bring more off-ball screening in for Klay. Klay also is quite a nifty passer for his position. And so it's, I got a couple of messages today. It's like saying, well, the Mavericks still don't have that third playmaker. They don't have a third. Okay, if you don't think that Klay is a playmaker, I guess I get it. But I say that the man can make plays when and does some pretty nice stuff with the Warriors. Kevon Looney is a pretty incredible story, but he's not Derek Lively. Okay, he's not.
Or I don't even know if he's Daniel Gafford.
Or Daniel Gafford, and it's like what? Like the Mavs bigs are going to eat next year on offense. It's gonna be remarkable.
Yeah, for sure. And there's different, like we said, I think we said either before free agency started or maybe I talked about it on that first night that I was talking with Matthew, our staffer, Matthew Phillips. Like, yeah, it would be ideal if the Mavericks could get a third guy a wing that could defend and shoot and dribble and do some stuff with the ball in his hands. But that also happens to be the most desirable player in the NBA right now. And that's not easy to get when you're a team with the Mavericks who, they've already spent a lot of resources to get the roster that they have right now. So you make do with the board. Like, who was that player available to them to get that? Like, they're going to get Paul George? No. That's kind of the type of player that you're talking about. So you got to make do with the board and that's in front of you, play the board that's in front of you. And with Klay, yeah, he's not an off the dribble maestro like a Luka or Kyrie or even like a Jaylen Brown or a Derek White if we want to go to the NBA, the Boston Celtics role players.
That's right.
But there's other ways to create offense and spacing and shots. And Klay has a different skill set, but he can help alleviate that pressure on Luka and Kyrie. So even if he's not someone that's going to be running 10 pick and rolls a game, he's going to be very active in influencing how the Mavericks get open shots. It's just in a different way.
And it'll be an evolution. And that's the one thing I'm kind of going to really try to emphasize to myself and on this show as we continue to talk about the Mavericks, because where they start is not where they will finish. And that is something that should be very evident to everybody after the Mavericks were 26 and 23 at one point and then made the NBA Finals. So it's kind of where we are. All right, I want to talk a little bit about Grimes and Najee Marshall. But let's take a quick break here. We're about halfway through our show. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, guys. We come here at least once a week. We'll probably try to do, there's Summer League next week, and I might try to record a little bit with people who have paid attention to the games. I'm actually going out there. I don't expect Josh to watch Summer League games, and he's not going to anyways. So we will at least come back and, kind of figure out what we're going to talk about as the summer goes along. I'll attempt to have our other secondary show or live show where you guys can come up and talk basketball with me and ask questions. I really do enjoy doing those. Last summer, I did it on Fridays in the afternoon because I had a boss who was cool. This year, I don't have that ability, so I'm not quite sure when I'm going to fit these shows in. So we'll figure that out. While you're here, if you could consider giving us a like, subscribe. If you're watching a little bit later, leave a comment. If you're listening on an audio feed, please leave us a review. This is obviously the time of the year where we're just sort of looking ahead, casting about. There's only the hardcore people join live shows like this. We're really appreciative of the people who decide to hang out and spend their time consuming Mavs basketball stuff with us. So I'm going to insert our audio ads if you would mind listening to those if you're listening on the audio stream, and we will be right back.
Precisa ferir a pressão, medir a glicemia ou tomar uma vacina? Na Raia tem exames, testes e calendário vacinal completo. E o que é melhor, tem sempre uma Raia aí perto de você. É fácil, prático e rápido. Dá para ir entre uma música e outra. Procure nossos farmacêuticos. Quanto mais você conhece o que a gente faz na Raia, mais você se cuida.
Okay. I am having a hard time not sort of casting, like wish casting and thinking too far ahead about Grimes and Marshall. Like Klay is Klay, and the Mavericks are going to have that's going to be such a complex discussion about what you use him for, when you use him, how you use him, and how you get the most out of him. Marshall is a fascinating guy. Obviously not the high flyer Derek Jones Jr. was, but Pelicans folks were pretty high on the signing for the Mavericks. And that's fascinating to me. And obviously Matthew came in here and talked a lot about him as you've sort of settled in, and as we've gotten used to him, the concept of Najee Marshall being a Maverick. What do you think about him?
I thought it was interesting that there was so much worry, I think, from the fan base when they kind of basically swapped Marshall for Jones. And I think there were a lot of people upset, and rightfully so. I think I said this before. Like, their fans should be attached to a player like Derek Jones Jr. He was awesome. Like, he had one of the best. He might have had the best year of his NBA career here. He was an important part of a finals run. It's going to be a special season, like that fans won't forget. Like when I was younger, like I still thought about that too, even though it ended in heartbreak. Like that 2006 run was still awesome, even though they didn't win. And even though they blew a 2-0 lead in the finals, like it was still an amazing run with amazing moments, like that Game 7 win on the road in San Antonio against Tim Duncan Spurs. Like you'll never forget that stuff. So like you remember, like I remember role players from that team still, and you're gonna remember guys like Derek Jones Jr. So I get the reason why they're upset, but I just thought it was funny because I've always thought I think Marshall's a better player, and I said that when it happened. And they're different players, so I think that's important to say. Right. Like Jones is a high flyer.
The vertical element worries me a little bit because like that I think was an underrated. Everybody thought it was cool, but the psychological effect of getting like Lively and Jones dunking on you is real.
Yeah, and remember that series against the Clippers when Jones and Lively and Washington were all on the floor. Like it looked like the Clippers were like a G League. Like it was like, what is going on? Like the Mavericks were dominating them physically in a way that the Mavericks just never dominated teams physically before. So yeah, they're going to miss part of that, but Marshall's not a slouch. He's got a 7'1" wingspan. He's a little bit, I think he's about Jones's height or maybe like an inch taller. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're similar heights. Obviously doesn't have the vertical aspect of Jones, but still a pretty dogged defender. He's a bit more physical, a bit stronger. And I think this move, it kind of shows the Mavericks reacting to that Boston series where it was like, okay, it's cool that we've got all the, they're trying to lean away from this Luka and Kyrie with all these spot up guys. Not to say, Marshall can spot up and he spot up and hit spot up threes pretty well last season, although it was only his only season that he's hit threes in his first 4 seasons. But you could tell that there's a shift since Nico's been here. Like we're getting away from this Luka has to do everything with these guys that can only make shots if they're spoon fed. You bring in PJ, you bring in Kyrie, you bring in PJ, you bring in Klay, you swap Jones for Marshall. Marshall has a bit more off the bounce juice to his game. He's not someone that's going to run offense for you, but in terms of attacking closeouts and doing something with the shot clock running down, he is exceptionally better at that stuff than Derek Jones Jr. He even has a little bit of a mid-range pull-up jumper in his game. And I think that goes to show kind of the philosophy shift where it felt like the previous regime that was running the, Donnie Nelson regime was like, let's give Luka as many spot up threats as possible because he's so awesome at creating threes. And you still need those guys to hit threes and you need those spot up guys. But as we've seen, teams are running those guys off the lines more than ever now. Like there's just been a shift and you need guys that can do something against the closeout. And Marshall, I think, fits the bill. And I think it just represents that philosophy shift where they're like, okay, maybe we take a small step back on defense, even though Marshall's still a good defender. But we need more people that can do stuff when Luka is being guarded one-on-one and kicks it out on a drive and it's not a wide open opportunity. What are you going to do? Because
Right.
Jones wasn't that kind of player that could take advantage of that coverage.
Well, Jones
Marshall could be a little bit better.
Jones took 3 3-pointers a game for the Mavericks last year. Klay Thompson is obviously going to eat. Like if you think about the minute dispersal, Najee Marshall is not going to play. I'm going to. He strikes me as a guy who's realistically going to play between 18 and 24 minutes a game. And that's going to cause some people to be like, whoa, we expect him. But I mean, Klay's got it unless the Mavericks really are determined to make Klay like a 22-minute a game bench guy, like he's going to play some, there's going to be different combinations of people. And my point is like Marshall may not need to shoot that many threes a game. Like they might have him in completely different positions where he gets to do different things. And if he is in a position where he's getting a couple catch and shoot threes per game with the quality of shot look that he gets because he's playing with Luka, Kyrie, and other people, I feel fine. Like I feel fine with his shooting percentage. Like it's a volume based approach. Like if guys are shooting like 6 a game, I don't know. I can't remember how many Dorian Finney-Smith was shooting towards the end, but like when Dorian wasn't hitting is obviously like critical for the Mavericks to win or lose. And like right now, a guy like Marshall just has to slide in and do the things that he's good at. And if he can expound on that, all the better. But the defense is something that's pretty interesting to me. Like lots of folks seem to think he is a really solid defender, bigger guy. I mean, that was very clearly what Derek Jones Jr. just couldn't do against the Celtics is they did not care because they were all bigger and stronger than him. So that's a difficult one. So I don't know. I'm pretty pleased with how things have turned out with the offseason. I mean, the last guy that we, just briefly touched on is Grimes. And to me, Grimes is a low risk, high reward gamble for a guy who had some pretty great periods of play followed by an injury. So, if he can't get his body right, that is what it is. But, you got something as opposed to Hardaway, just, like getting him off your books for nothing and having to send a trade away. I'm looking forward to watching him.
Yeah. He said at the presser, he's 100% healthy and he has no concerns about what dogged him after he got traded to Detroit. So we'll see. So presumably he should be okay.
Yep.
Yeah. He's interesting because he feels like the player the Mavericks wished Josh Green was.
Yeah.
Green is obviously a bit more, I don't know how to say it, like his offensive creativity, he has a bit more passing juice. Grimes is more of a traditional kind of 3-and-D player. And I know we just talked about the Mavericks needing more role players that can do a little bit more than just stand still and hit spot up threes. But you still need some of those guys. And it felt like the Mavericks, for what Green's role was coming off the bench, like it was just hard. He was just inconsistent because he just didn't shoot enough, and his shot got a little inconsistent last season. Grimes can shoot if he's right. He gets shots up and he makes them at a high clip. It's just he's just a different player than Green. You're going to lose a little bit of that passing creativity that Green would bring off the bench, but you're getting a little bit more reliable shooter, a more willing shooter, and you're getting a better defender flat out. Like Green just regressed a lot last season defensively. And if you believe some defensive metrics that are floating around out there, the thing that Grimes is really good at, apparently, is getting through screens and staying attached to perimeter players. And when you consider how the Mavericks play defense with their bigs wanting to keep Lively and Gafford as close to the rim as possible, then Grimes fits right into what they want to do, because you need guys that can stay attached through screens if your bigs aren't going to play up as aggressively as a more switching defense. So he was on a trajectory. I mean, a rookie getting, almost 20 minutes a game under Tom Thibodeau. Like
pretty tough, man.
He was doing something right in New York. And there were discussions about like not untouchable level, but like New York did not want to willingly trade him in a lot of rumored packages. And they eventually did trade him because I think they kind of reached a point where they felt comfortable with their roster to trade him, but he's a pretty good get. Like he could be quietly maybe one of the best acquisitions of the summer, like just in terms of like
if he pans out, yeah,
value, yeah, if he pans out.
And so
And he's a Texas boy. I kind of forgot about that.
Oh, is he? Where?
He's born in Houston.
Okay.
Just outside a suburb of Houston, and then he went to Kansas for 2 years and then finished at Houston.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a nice moment at the press conference. Someone asked him about that, and his family still lives in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And he said his mom was like over the moon that he got traded to Dallas so that they could like see him more.
Sure.
It's nice to see some of that personal stuff come out from these guys. I like that.
So I said before the offseason, and this is before the Mavericks lost Derrick Jones Jr., but I said I was feeling pretty good because obviously to be a title contender, like a true title contender, you need to go 7 deep where you are extremely confident in your top 7. Celtics, great example of this. Very confident, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, and who am I missing? PJ Washington. And now you also add in Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson, potentially Grimes. That's 8 guys right there. That does not get in to the other Mavericks that were on the team that were returning that ended up being, Dante Exum, for example. We thought he was going to be a key part of the season. I still think he could be something. We have our guys in the comments talking about Omax maybe being an interesting guy for this next year. And I'm just pretty fascinated with the team that they have returning. A lot of the guys that could come back, there's Jaden Hardy maybe getting another shot. Maybe Maxi Kleber with a little more time to recover his health can play 12 minutes a game and give the Mavericks something here and there, not as like a need, but as just an added bonus. I'm feeling pretty good about the offseason. I think other Mavericks fans should be too.
Yeah, if things work out the way I think they might, I mean, like you said, that top 8 is pretty good,
man.
Pretty talented. And I would say if you're comparing it to their top 8 from last season, they've upgraded. And I think one of the things about this summer we were curious about was how are they going to upgrade? Because the team is pretty good. Like they made the finals, so obviously the roster was pretty good. So with their cupboard of assets, it was like, okay, how are they going to improve? Are they going to dip into some future firsts yet? Which they still haven't, by the way. They've got some future firsts.
I think they hold on to those picks just because they're so close to that apron, and they need more inexpensive assets. So I kind of think they hold on to their 2025 now.
Yeah, I think the next time they trade a first rounder will be for the move that I think they think is the
2025 the 2025 draft is going to be like bank break unbelievably good. So, well, man, we always do this in the off season where I don't think we have much to talk about. We end up talking longer about a lot of things. So we got a couple more things I think we should hit. I want to just at least briefly talk in passing. We don't talk about as much international basketball because we just don't have the bandwidth for it. But during the Olympic qualifying tournaments, the Slovenia national team was not able to make it out of the qualifying tournament. They lost to Greece and Giannis Antetokounmpo in their final match, and that was one where it's just Slovenia just doesn't have the size right now for a country that has roughly half the population of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. It's pretty amazing that they're on these stages so consistently to begin with. Like their soccer team was pretty amazing. They have a guy that's won the Tour de France, like an incredibly athletic country given the size. And so your luck is going to run out at some point. In 2017 when Luka was just sort of bursting on the international scene, they made it really far on whichever tournament that was where they beat Kristaps. Yeah, I don't want to say. I always get it wrong, so I can't remember which one. But it's like Luka was just coming on, and you had
Goran
Dragic? Goran Dragic kind of at his wily veteran peak. And so it's just like when you're that small and you just don't have, you need things to bounce right for you. And the 3-point shooting wasn't really there for Luka or Slovenia, and they ended up losing game. They made a little bit of a rally, but they just didn't have size. And that's okay. It's just sort of the nature of thing. What that means though, now that Luka is gone. And I didn't, I always take pity on people who are like, yeah, I'm glad Slovenia lost. Like, I'm not glad Slovenia lost. I want Luka to play basketball because it makes him happy. Even Luka, I think after the game, though, mentioned how much basketball he played and talked about how it will be good to get a rest. So this
will probably be the most rest he's had. Well, it's so bizarre that this might be the most time he has not playing basketball in a summer. Maybe since the year he got drafted in 2018.
Maybe it's hard. It's, you start throwing stuff out. Like, they got to obviously report back for things by September. So, you get the rest of July and August, and I'm sure he takes some time off, and then I'm sure he starts training again. Like, he was in really, really good shape, more or less, this year. The knee thing and the way he plays, I think that there's just always going to be elements of Luka where, you got to kind of just hope he's healthy, because he's going to get hurt. He's too
It's happened almost every season now where he's kind of dinged up by the end of the season.
He's too physical a player. And honestly, he reminds me, and I've said this before, he gives me that Derek Jones vibe where, like, him getting hit almost seems to be better for his game. And so there's just some dangers with that is all. So I'm sure he'll figure out, he works with some of the best people in the world. I'm sure he has specific things that he wants to work on. I'm sure his trainers and the people that work for him bring things to him that they want him to focus on. So I'm sure he'll get right back in the closest thing to a lab. We'll never see it. They rarely post Luka videos, which I kind of love, in the Instagram age, where Luka just, comes back and is how he looks. And so I'm pretty excited about that, but it is good that he gets a rest, and we'll probably only see snippets of him at probably Jordan events and stuff over the summer,
Yeah, it'll be good for him. I know he's probably pissed off for sure. But it'll be good for him maybe in the long run physically. And then, we get to see, because, he only had the roster that made it to the finals for basically like 2.5 months of the regular season. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like. Because, the big thing with the Mavericks and Luka is they just have to get to a point where he just doesn't need to do everything. And they were getting there after the trade deadline. Didn't happen in the finals because they just ran into a team that exposed their roster weaknesses in a perfect way. But I'll be curious to see, because remember last season, like November, December, he was like having to score 30, 40 points every game or the Mavericks lost. Like, I remember there was a streak in December where it was like the Mavericks didn't win a game without one of Luka or Kyrie scoring like 35 or more, like for like 3 weeks straight. Like,
yep.
So to start, can they, and I feel like that's happened like the last 3 seasons. Can they get through November and December without Luka having to kill himself for them to be 500? And now that they've got all these pieces to enter the season that they feel confident about, maybe they can up that usage rate a little bit. That helps.
Well, and we'll talk about this as we get close to the regular season. One of our regular contributors, commenters, who always sends me messages, just noted, he's like, I think the Mavericks are going to win 60 games next year with how talented they are. And my thought back to him was, they got to take the regular season seriously then, because there's just elements of the regular season where, either due to injury, luck, or focus, during Jason Kidd's tenure, the November to February, kind of like November, December, January record is bad. Like, it was under 500 the last time I did the math. And then the February, March, April is like well over 500 during the Kidd tenure. And that's pretty hilarious. So it's just like, you got to take, I understand what Kidd goes for, which is playing your best basketball at the right time. And 2 out of 3 seasons, he's been right. So who am I to judge? Yeah. I just want them to get home court,
Yeah.
That's just
it's hard to win an NBA title if you're not a top 4 seed in either conference.
Oh my God, it's so difficult. So anyway, the last thing I'd like to talk about before we get out of here. So Summer League starts this weekend. The Mavericks play Saturday night. Then they play on Monday night, then Wednesday night, and then Friday. And then they should get one more game. But it's like the Mavericks Summer League. If you don't pay attention to it, that's perfectly okay. The kind of guys who you might be interested in who they're going to have out there. The Mavericks draft pick, Melvin Njinka, is playing. Let's see here. Alex Fudge, who the Mavericks had on the roster for a significant part of the season, is playing. And he's one of those guys. I can't even remember what kind of contract he had.
He's on a two-way, I believe. Well, he was last season.
Right. So then they have AJ Lawson, who we're all familiar with. Omax is going to basically play every minute of every game. Then they have Brandon Williams, who is a two-way guard, who is, he's almost 25 years old. He'll probably be kind of the veteran guy that runs things for the team. The only other player that I'm kind of interested in seeing, at least for right now, is this 7'5", 23-year-old center out of Ole Miss named Jamarian Sharp. 7'5" is just nothing to scoff at, period. So I can't help myself. I'm very curious that when I'm out there, I go out there most times just to kind of connect with friends and get away from
you're the shadow broker.
Yeah,
you got
to I also just I sickly like Las Vegas. I love that town. So
I feel like Summer League is when you need the Kirk, like it's your Kirk. You get to recharge your energy.
I didn't even think I was, because my wife told me last year, she's like, "You're not going. We're gonna have a baby," and I'm like, "Okay." And I didn't say anything. And then like 3 weeks ago, she's like, "So are you going? Like, when are you going to Vegas?" And I was like, "You told me not to go, so I haven't even looked." So then I had to like scramble and then that sort of thing. And so I'm looking forward. I'm meeting couple different, Dalton is actually going to be out there with his dad. Looking forward to seeing him. We got regular post-show contributor Glenn King, who lives out there, and I'm going to connect with him at some point. Probably go watch that game together on Saturday night, so that'll be fun. But we'll kind of see what we can stretch out. I mean, these summer shows in the past, when Josh and I started doing this in 2020, not 20, well, I guess we started 2019. You started 2018. Like, we've had a lot of extenuating circumstances that have like pushed a lot of stuff together where we've really been able to talk fairly regularly because there's just something to talk about. That may well be the case right now, but I am having a hard time seeing it. I just don't know what's going to be coming. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I know. Cause their off season is basically done. They're going to they've got like, I think one more roster spot that they'll probably use. Maybe if they just re-sign Markieff Morris, then we don't have much to talk about there. Maybe they bring back Dennis Smith Jr. We can get a show out of that for sure. But yeah, the roster's kind of set. They've made all their moves, which is kind of fun because how many Mavs off seasons has it been where they don't do anything like the first 3 days?
Well, and if we're gonna have to engage, and you don't do this near as much as I do, but if the internet slowly starts to eat itself from late July into August, at least we're now not arguing over players who suck. Like, the Mavericks have so many interesting players. I'm really excited about what that means, as opposed to talking about who is the little guard that they picked up during the bubble and then re-signed
Trey Burke.
Trey Burke and the Willie Cauley-Stein.
Like, they use their mid-level exception.
And everybody has talked about how good of a thing that was. And I just remember losing my mind and screaming about it on the show. I'm like, we're not talking about that stuff anymore. Like, this is neat. This is like, if someone wants to like project all their hope onto Omax, that's fine. Because right now he's not in the rotation. And that means the Mavericks are pretty friggin' stacked. I'm pretty pumped, man. Pretty pumped.
For sure.
Okay, well, it's almost been an hour. Josh, you're great. Everybody who got to hear me chastise my child at the beginning of the show, let's see if he's still awake. I bet he's still awake and he wants to be in trouble because that's just the way life goes for me sometimes. This has been Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. I will try to record something while I'm out there in Vegas, maybe Sunday. If anybody, is going out to Vegas, please be sure to reach out to me. I always like saying hi and chatting with people. Everybody be good. This has been Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe of Pod Maverick. Have a great rest of your week and go Mavs.
I'm Xavier Worthy, wide receiver for the NFL. Speeding. It's a rush on the field, in the zone, where it matters. As an athlete, I push my limits to win. But when I get behind the wheel, I know the importance of slowing down for safety. Because speeding is illegal. It endangers you, your loved ones, and everyone else on the road. Did you know speeding accounts for more than 1/4 of all traffic-related fatalities nationwide? Just like we need to focus to score touchdowns and win games, we need to be in the zone to stay safe on the road. Speed limits are in place to protect everyone, no matter what the speed limit is. Anything over is not only illegal, but dangerous. Like athletes, drivers must stay alert and present because there is no reward for speeding. Nothing is safe about it. Driving over the speed limit might seem like the quicker option, but speeding catches up with you. Stay focused. In a split second, everything can change. Paid for by NHTSA.